Cyberpunk 2077 was a massively anticipated game before it launched, and yet on release it was unplayable for many, specifically those playing on base PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones. Though you can play it on current generation consoles, there is no set PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X version just yet, and on PC where it works best, it's hardly a shining masterpiece either. It was obvious that this game was going to get some serious backlash, and it did, both as a result of years of anticipation from many and the fact that for a massive portion of the player base, they couldn't even play a game they'd paid for on launch because it didn't work. Well, we've gone over all this in a previous video, and I'm not going to get myself in the spirit of rehashing, so this video will focus primarily on some more recent events. As of recording this video, it's the 16th of January 2021. It's been over a month since the game officially launched, and it's still far from finished. A few days ago, CD Projekt co-founder Marcin Nowinski issued something of an apology video. It's good leadership to take responsibility for your own errors and deliver a sincere apology to your fans, especially those who paid money for a product that didn't turn out to be what they anticipated it to be. Refunds may have been offered and by many accepted, but I think we can all agree that's a little bit besides the point, because not everyone's going to take those refunds. A lot of fans are going to weather the storm in hopes that Cyberpunk 2077 is going to one day be the game they thought it was going to be. So they're still putting a great deal of trust in CD Projekt Red. Trust that at this point CD Projekt as a company frankly doesn't deserve. So I think the least that's owed here is of course the transparency, even if it comes with all sorts of PR fluff. What I mean by this is in this video CD Projekt is trying to avoid two things. One is looking bad and the other's getting sued, or more accurately, fueling the case against them because they're already getting sued. In this situation, what can you do? At that point, I feel for you. I don't because you dug your own grave, but I also do because you've got to find a way out of there and there isn't one. But in this commitment to quality video, I'll link it in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. Marcin Nowinski states that they never intended for it to go so wrong and they clearly underestimated the task. But I think it's pretty obvious that they did know it was going to go wrong, considering they didn't give reviewers freedom over discussing the console versions of the game, and according to Nowinski, they didn't hand out console review codes until the 8th. With the game coming out on the 10th, that's less than 2 days for reviewers to get enough hours into the game to actually come up with a well-crafted review, which is just not possible unless they're an absolute machine. Maybe there was some intent there, but let's take the tinfoil hats off. All it takes to know what kind of state your game is in is play it. You could have seen how it ran on a console by running it on a console, so you knew exactly how it ran, so they knew, and if they didn't intend for it to go so wrong, then maybe they should have just not released it, when it clearly wasn't ready. As for the statement that they underestimated the task, I believe that to be bollocks as well. According to a Bloomberg article by Jason Schreier that was published very recently, when the initial April 16th release date was announced at E3 2019 for the following year, the article states that fans were elated, but internally some members of the team could only scratch their heads wondering how they could possibly finish the game by then, with one person allegedly initially believing that the release date was a joke, and that based on the team's progress they expected the game to be ready in 2022. So is it likely they underestimated the task, or did they just not listen to the people actually making the game? On top of this, in the video, Nowinski says that the game was so packed and the disk bandwidth of old generation consoles is what it is, that it was constantly challenging, and despite that they extensively tested and couldn't find the issues that players experienced, and yet apparently developers who worked on the game argued otherwise, saying that many common problems were discovered, they just didn't have the time to actually fix them. So from this we can overall gather that it's more than likely that CD Projekt knew exactly what game they were shipping. They knew what state it was in, they shipped it anyway. That little bit of PR bollocks doesn't obstruct the rest of the video, fair enough to it, it's just a we're sorry, a lot piled up, we fucked up, we'll do better. Giving us this roadmap, which is pretty bare bones, and I can respect that, because if you want to make a bigger mess of things, it's by making more promises. So there's no dates given, we're between the release and the 2021 markers. Obviously patch 1.1 and 1.2 are coming, and then there will be multiple updates and improvements, free DLC, and then a free next-gen console upgrade for those who bought it on the last generation consoles, I presume. And that'll take us to the end of 2021, which I presume will be around a year after the game launched, which doesn't look good, but the game's out now. This transparency is the best damage control we can expect. Not saying it's good enough, not saying you owe CD Projekt Red patience, it's just what it is. In the end of the day, yes, they can't magic up a finished version of the game out of nowhere, but they shouldn't have released it at all in this state. Here's where things get a little bit worse for Cyberpunk, unfortunately. There's a lot of stuff in this Bloomberg article that's worth looking at, but this is something that I looked at and went, what the fuck? Do you remember the gameplay reveal demo that was shown off at E3 2018? Well, apparently this wasn't actual gameplay. Granted, it doesn't look too far off, it just looks significantly better. According to the article, this demo was almost entirely fake. Apparently, CD Projekt hadn't yet finalized and coded the underlying gameplay systems, so some features such as car ambushes wound up being missing from the final product. And so apparently developers said they felt the demo was a waste of months that should have gone towards making the game. I agree, make the game before you market it, don't market a game you don't have yet. I'm not saying this demo was necessarily misleading to us in the grand scheme of things, there were some things in it that just weren't in the game, but the issue comes from the waste of time and resources on a demo that isn't actually a part of the game. It's just an imitation of what they wanted the game to be. Now, considering the state that Cyberpunk was released in, what do you mean? Isn't this similar to what Anthem did, where they announced their game and showed off gameplay before they even had a game? I'm not going to entertain the discussion of whether or not it was as bad, because it's, again, not relevant. Don't market a game you don't have. You'll either not get a finished product that's quite up to that demo, or you'll just waste time. And in Cyberpunk's case, it was the latter more so. Apparently, management said that delaying the game wasn't an option, as their goal was to release Cyberpunk before the new consoles from Microsoft and Sony released in the fall of 2020, so that way they could capitalize on next-gen updates down the line. Some developers realized the game was too complex to run on the old consoles, and apparently management dismissed their concerns, citing the success pulling off The Witcher 3. By the end of 2019, management did come around to acknowledging that Cyberpunk needed to be delayed, pushing the release date back to September, and from March, CD Projekt staff had to complete the game from home due to COVID-19. As a result of this, they didn't have access to the office's console development kits, so most developers would play builds of the game on their home computers, so it wasn't clear how the console versions would run. However, external tests showed clear performance issues. So, CD Projekt may not have intended for this to happen, of course they didn't. They wanted to release a game that they could be proud of. Why? Because that has the least backlash going. That's just logic. But I can't understand how they wouldn't at least notice some of these red flags, and why they wouldn't follow up on those to the point where they'd realise the game wasn't in a state that was fit for release. Unless they did, and surely to Christ they did. Listen, 2020 was a rough year for everybody. COVID-19 hit everyone hard, and as a result a lot of people had to work from home, and that's going to stunt productivity. You're not in the same office. There are some things that ordinarily you would take for granted there, like the video says, and at home you don't have access to those things, and only then do you realise how important they are. I get that you can't do anything about missing them, but that doesn't mean you have to release the game on the date you set. Delay it again, delay it a year. Be like, listen, COVID's fucked us. Done deal. Nobody questions it. CD Projekt Red releases one AAA game every few years. I doubt an extra year in that cycle is going to cause them to go bust. 2 years even if it came to it. Then again, I don't necessarily know. I don't run CD Projekt, do I? Maybe they had to pay off some debts to the Mafia or something. I get it. You have to bend the rules then, don't you? Otherwise you're going to lose your fingers. Really? As one final thing, apparently the project essentially hit reset in 2016 despite being announced as early as 2012. And from there they built an engine from the ground up alongside building the game itself, which sounds like a recipe for disaster. Apologies if you can still hear that drill in the background, it's bothering me too. And so realistically, CD Projekt had all of the warning signs that Cyberpunk was going to need more time than they were willing to give it. And so while I believe that yes, they may be committed to turning this game around, to making it something beneficial for them, something that can be passable as a good game, so that way they can put it behind them and work on the next big thing eventually. I'm certain they want that. Don't get me wrong, they'll improve it, they'll work on it. But I don't think it'll ever be that 10 out of 10 fantastic game that people thought it would be. For a lot of fans, their love and anticipation for this game, or at least the idea of it, got pissed out the window, and they have no intention of retrieving it. And you can't blame those people. Frankly, I'm not far off being one of them. I have no clue if I'll ever come back to play this game. It didn't launch too great, and nobody owes CD Projekt the patience to get it right when you've already bought it. You'd think on release it'll be passable. I played on PC, and while the issues weren't anywhere near as prominent as those on consoles, I think it's fair to say the game was still lacking a lot of depth in the world, in the immersion. It certainly didn't feel particularly fluid, and there were plenty of bugs. So if I'm coming away with a sour taste in my mouth from the best experience this game has to offer, at least as far as platforms are concerned, then I can 100% understand where people playing on consoles are coming from. When it comes down to it, I feel nothing for the management of CD Projekt. They chose to release the game in this state. It's great that they're aware that it was their decision and the responsibility was theirs to bear alone, but I'm not going to trust them. I don't think I can ever trust them again after a sting like that. I'm sure for a lot of gamers, CD Projekt Red will work stupidly hard for many years to regain even a modicum of the trust from their fans that they may have once had. And honestly, my sympathy goes to all of the developers who worked on Cyberpunk, who worked on The Witcher before it, who have had their reputations pissed down the drain by their management because they wanted to capitalise on 2 generations for the price of 1 game. Those developers don't deserve this. They deserve better. They've proven that they can make great games, and according to a few people who I know that have finished Cyberpunk, if you can look past some of its more technical limitations, there is a great game there, and the hard work of the people whose passion made it deserves to shine, but unfortunately, it never will. An example I'm going to give is No Man's Sky. In 2016, it was released and it wasn't quite what was promised. In fact, it was far from that. Apparently over the years it's been updated and it's now a decent game, according to people who still bothered to play it. Most people won't bother because why should they? I'm not saying there aren't necessarily exceptions to that rule, but the odds are stacked against Cyberpunk now. It promised to be more than it was, and it really started with that 2018 demo that was fake. Wasted resources that could have gone towards actually making the game and then showing it when it was in a state that was ready. They shouldn't have announced a release date they could never reach. They shouldn't have aimed to release the game before the beginning of the next generation of consoles just so that they could release it again. And the management should have listened to their employees telling them that this game was not ready and there was no chance of them hitting that 2020 deadline. Cyberpunk. You really made a mess of it, didn't you? I think CD Projekt now serves as an example. No matter how great the games the company makes are, no matter what company you think is going to be the definitive best in the industry, they can always fall, and many have. Think Ubisoft, maybe some EA studios like BioWare. Bethesda fell from grace not too long ago with Fallout 76, though to be fair, Bethesda has always been a bit of a weird one. And I guess CD Projekt was bound to take a tumble eventually. And I guess that concludes today's video because there's nothing really else to talk about. I don't doubt that we'll see improvements to Cyberpunk over the next few months, and whether or not you'll continue to play this game or revisit it in the future is completely up to you, of course. Let me know if you'll be doing that, because I'm not entirely sure if I will myself. Thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be fantastic. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, take care and goodbye.